Good morning. Hi, everybody. Happy Wednesday. I love saying happy Wednesday every Wednesday morning. It's certainly an awesome way for me to start my Wednesday, and I hope it's a good one for you. This morning, it is my pleasure to have my friend Marla Abraham from the United States Holocaust Memorial Museum in Washington, D.C. She's on the West Coast, and she's the West Coast Regional Director for Development out here. And there she is. I'm going to bring her on. Let's see, something updated in my thing here. Okay, I'm going to invite. Yeah. Okay. I like. Sometimes these updates like freak me out and scare me, but this one was actually successful. There you are. Good
Yay.
morning to you.
Good morning. Good morning. Happy Wednesday back.
Thank you. Thank you. This is such a treat. It's like, especially with the COVIDian era, this is how I get to have coffee with my friends.
That's right. That's so right. I was thinking this morning how what's it going to be like when we're not on a screen and we're actually in 3D and we'll have to like do the back of our hair, not just the front.
That's hilarious. That is so true. Very, very true. I have been able to get away with a lot of murder. Definitely. Definitely. Well, it's wonderful seeing you today. And, you have been such a champion for the film that I'm working on right now. Would You Hide Me is something that I've been working on for the last 3.5 years. And you are responsible for the very first guests that I had on Banter with Beth. So there have just been so many ways that you have been a champion and been so supportive of the project, and I'm so grateful. And I thank you. I thank you. Meeting Stephen Pressman, having him on the show, Ed Burzminski, having him on the show. I mean, I know there are others too, but those two guys just pop in my mind.
It's been an honor to somehow support, and I just want to sort of say that the way that we met was that you watched a program that the museum produced on our Facebook Live series and had a chat comment. And I saw it, and I saw Beth Lane in Los Angeles, and I thought, well, I got to see who she is. And I think it's another reminder in this crazy era where we feel all disconnected about how a relationship can begin and a connection and a community through this very virtual sort of impersonal way. But that's how you and I met.
Yeah. What a treat. And my guess is that our paths would have crossed at some point.
Yes.
Isn't it so much better that they happened early on,
Yes, totally.
after the film was finished and, all that kind of thing. So let's talk about your relationship and your life with USHMM. How long have you been with the museum, and what brought you there?
So I actually began, October 1st was my 2-year anniversary.
Oh.
So the first, let's see, about 16 months were pretty typical of a regional director trying to cross 10 states, and I have a pretty small team of 6 people, but we have a pretty wide reach. And then of course the last year has been as atypical as everyone else. But I think my journey to the museum is actually kind of a wonderful piece of the story. For me, Charlottesville was a huge wake-up call. My family came to the States in the 1890s, 1900s, left Russia, Poland, in the first wave of settlement and got out way early. And my parents were both born in Los Angeles in the 20s, which is pretty atypical. So I grew up in a milieu where we felt, definitely different being Jewish, but very much like this was a very, very safe and possible place for Jews to grow up and be and thrive. I grew up in a very rich, meaning robust kind of Jewish communal life, and temple was a big part of our life. Temple Israel Hollywood, for those of you out there. And I really didn't understand anti-Semitism here. I understood it historically. I married a man whose father was liberated from Bergen-Belsen on one of the 3 trains that they were trying to get more Jews to be killed at Theresienstadt, and he was liberated while on the train. so I married into that experience, but it was really not mine. And I really didn't grow up with that sort of inbred trauma that I think is part of that experience. Uh, Even though our three children obviously are third generation survivors. We were driving our youngest daughter to college up in Tacoma, Washington. I think we were in Oregon at a hotel, and watched Charlottesville unfold in front of us. And I'm getting chills again. That was, already now for almost more than 4 years ago. But I looked at my husband and I just had this moment of, oh my God, I have been in some sort of protective bubble my whole life, in my then mid 50s. And during that trip, I really started to reflect on what does it mean really to be an American Jew? What does anti-Semitism really mean here? America is not the democracy and the place that I thought it was. And what does that mean for me professionally, in addition to the personal side, since I've always worked in nonprofit organizations. And when this job came up, then about a year and a half or two later, I really felt called that this was my time to respond and to really make sure that this country always made the statement on its national mall as part of a federal institution that the lessons of the Holocaust must be taught, that we must prevent genocide, that this country's democracy must be given attention and watched and monitored and responded to in order to make sure that the promises of this country actually become true.
Yeah.
So it was a very deep kind of calling for me, and a real process to get here. And I think the fact that I did not grow up with Holocaust experience is another part of the picture, because I think if it's only survivors and their generations that follow that care about the history and teaching it and making sure we learn from the lessons, then we're really missing the full picture. And this is a collective responsibility and an honor to carry on and to share. So that's why.
Well, that's an incredible story. And, bravo you that you listened to your instincts. And also, I think there's something true about having time and space in your life to be able to bring in the breadth of the knowledge and the circumstance. I think that I got an email this morning from a young student up in Toronto who was at a talk that I gave, I guess, about a month ago. Excuse me. And I actually don't know if it's a man or a woman, but this student wrote to me and said, do you have volunteer opportunities? I really want to learn more. And I was like, that's amazing. Of course, I will find an opportunity for you. No question about it. And so we have these points in our lives, certainly when you're a student, but also it sounds like you and I both really took on empty nesthood, or I don't know if you still have some at home, but at least this shift in daily responsibilities where we can kind of take on more. And not that you can't do it when you're spinning 10,000 plates. We can all do so many things. We're all quite, I don't know, I've always called myself a virtual plate spinner. But there is something very heavy about the material. And there are days when we can be lighthearted about it and really understand the joy of the heroes and the people that did do the right thing, but you can never get away from the breadth of the atrocity. And I think that that's something that we make space for in our hearts and in our bones. And
yeah, I mean, I think it's interesting because a lot of people have said to me, like, this is heavy. Do you really want to do this all day, every day? And it's interesting. I will confess that my children call me the grand optimist because that's kind of my personality, my style. And I wouldn't say that that's how I look at the Holocaust by any stretch. But I will also tell you that part of what has been so uplifting is the stories of not just those who survived, but those who were murdered, but who held dignity and who had incredible lives and incredible legacies and histories, and making those come alive one of the commitments that I made when I took this job was any family who has a survivor who wrote or has a diary, I will read that story and I will read that book, because for me, that's another way of honoring what that life was about and what all of the family members who didn't make it with them, what their lives were about. I am incredibly moved by the stories like your family, where people risked everything to help your family survive. And we even did a show a couple weeks ago on our Facebook Live about women spies during World War II.
Which is incredible, isn't
Which
it?
is an amazing thing. And these amazingly, powerfully strong women who risked their lives, in a few cases were killed for it, but in some cases survived, and did this not because they were Jewish, but because they knew it was the right thing to do and risked everything. And so it's the stories of those kinds of experiences and the beauty of the memories that people share that I actually find on some days so uplifting. It's like an adrenaline rush, which sounds bizarre. At the same time, holding space for the atrocities, and a lot of what the museum does as well is talk about modern day genocide and genocide prevention, and that's happening in our time. That's not historical. That's not memory. But it is honoring the memory to do that work. And so I think that's how we also hold space, is by taking action and doing the things that we wish had happened in our own history.
Right, right. I mean, I think it's wonderful that the museum takes on both. You take on the Jewish experience of understanding it, and then you also broaden it to what is happening in the world today, and how can we, you don't want to compare genocides, but we can certainly learn the lessons from each one, and how we as a community can assure that the little drip of water that creates hate, creates any kind of anti-other, what can we do about that?
Yeah, exactly. And I think, that's the piece I think that's so powerful about the lessons of the Holocaust, is that the roots are kind of all the same. Once you begin othering and differentiating, then you open these huge holes in social fabric that allow people to not only be active collaborators, but passive bystanders and all sorts of other things that allow then the social fabric to totally disintegrate. And allow an atrocity like that to happen. So that's a big part of the work. That was also something that very much appealed to me, because it is forward looking and it is present looking.
Yes.
And I think, to kind of circle back again to your film, which I'm so excited about when it's eventually done, you're telling the story not just because it's your family story and it's something that you hold dear and you want to honor, past, present, future, but it's about all of us putting ourselves in those stories. And one of the other pieces, I know I'm going to sound like an advertisement for the museum, but I
That's okay.
I feel it. One of the things that we often say is really from Elie Wiesel, who, when the museum was going to open, said, this museum cannot be about answers, it is about questions. And one of the key things, I'm going to divert for just a minute. I know time is short, but when I had the opportunity to go to Poland, and I was visiting Auschwitz, where my husband's paternal grandparents were killed. They were Hungarian Jews. And, I had this moment. I was walking through and I was thinking about my own children and, what would I have done? And would I have been one of those people that would have risked everything to save somebody else and put my own children at risk? And it was kind of a very big moment where I'd always thought of myself I would be that person. And then I thought about my own children, and it really changed that equation. And to further what Elie was always trying to get at is what we want to get people to do is not to say, what would I have done as I did as I walked through Auschwitz, but what will I do? Because we will not be back in history, but we will be part of our own present and future. And what actions will we choose to take based on what we know and what lessons we have learned? And that's really the power I think one of the things the museum does beautifully, both virtually and in person when it's open again, is that it doesn't tell you what to think.
Right.
It pushes you to ask your own questions, explore more, and make it personal and
Mm-hmm.
about your own actions, and that every person's action is what make things happen for the good or the bad.
It's absolutely true. And it's something that we talk about, my editorial team and I talk about it all the time with every cut that we're doing, where we're taking things out that say, oh, that's telling the audience what to think. No, yank it out. We don't need that. And,
Yeah. Yeah.
when you're filming a documentary, you have to kind of posit these things to elicit the conversations. But
Yeah.
then we just have to remember in the edit room, okay, let's take that comment out. We don't need it. Let the audience come to their own experience.
That's right. And really deeply engage, which is what documentaries really ask you to do if they're done well. They want the viewer to be part of the experience and then to take them. I mean, one of the things we always say in my family is when you think about a movie, documentary or otherwise, 2 or 3 days later,
mm-hmm.
it's done its job because it makes you engage and it makes you keep thinking about it. It wasn't just an hour, hour and a half, 2 hour experience, but it becomes part of how you question and think, and that's really powerful.
Well, and I think that's what's so beautiful about museums as well, and especially USHMM. It is certainly a place where students are brought. Of course, everyone is welcome, but it gives students this very physically tangible and active way to understand history.
Mm-hmm.
And even just by virtue of the fact that they're standing and walking, and of course, the way the museum is designed, really give somebody an experience that they can feel inside their bodies.
Yeah, yeah.
Like,
and they sort of take the journey through. I mean, even, after I was offered and took this position, I went back to the museum for another time and had a deeper tour. Even at this point in my life where, I've studied all of this, I was reminded yet again, this wasn't an overnight experience. This was a 10-year journey from the beginnings of what Hitler would do and the Third Reich would do to what happened. It was not overnight. It happened slowly. It happened through laws. It happened through the judiciary, through the police. All of these things that we look to in society that are supposed to be our safeguards, our guardrails, were used to do it. And that, again, I remember talking to the person who was touring me. I said, it's like another wake-up call and reminder about how this happened. And we tend to experience it more how we see it in the movies, where you go into this instant, kind of change of life and ghettoization and then murder. And it was a much slower kind of process. I wanted to say something about the virtual space that we've all come into, but also something even kind of in a more longitudinal look with another personal story. So one of our middle daughter was in, I think, second grade and came home, or we all got home. It must have been 6 o'clock or something. And she was very, very upset. And, I said, what's going on? And she said, her teacher, whose name I will not share, told me that all Holocaust survivors have numbers tattooed on their arm. And she said, and Zeta doesn't. Has Zeta been lying to us about his experience?
Oh my.
And I kind of fell over backwards. We've always told our girls probably too early on what their Zeta's experience was, even though he didn't talk about it very much. And I looked at her and I said, well, of course he wasn't lying. And of course what he experienced was true. This was, she's now 25. So this was 18 or so years ago, maybe less. But this was pre-internet. And I knew that there was a source I could use for this teacher to say it was only in Auschwitz that they tattooed numbers, which is only a small proportion of the survivors. But I wanted to have the academic source material to do that.
Yeah.
At the time, I happened to work in academia, and I called a colleague who was a specialist in the Holocaust, and she was able to give me the citation. And I was able to call the teacher and make an appointment and sort of say to her, here's the resource, the historical resource. This is not true. It turned out we had a wonderful conversation. She was Armenian, and she shared her history with me, and
Mm-hmm.
it turned out okay. But I share the experience because I actually brought this up in my interview for this job. There was no internet for me to go check out what the truth was.
Mm-hmm.
Luckily, I had the personal resources to do so. But the Holocaust encyclopedia that the museum has online that now gets like 16 million visitors a year in, I think, something like 27 languages, you can go check that now. That's easy and accessible. And it wasn't, even when my 25-year-old was in second grade. And I will never forget,
Mm-hmm.
was Zeta lying to us? I mean, it's sort of just, it will never probably lose the power that it had, because it just destroyed me that she even had, for those 4 or 5 hours before she got home, this thought that somehow her grandfather was making up this experience and all these survivors were. Which kind of brings me to another point that I shared with you the other day. Um, you know, we often say something to the effect of, this is about relentless fidelity to historical truth. And I think in this era of Holocaust denial, everything else, the museum opened the Americans in the Holocaust exhibit about 4 years ago, that really talks about what America actually did know. And I was also raised with, we didn't know, we didn't know. When I first learned, I was like, so what did you do? What did you do when you, and in truth, it was in every major and minor newspaper across this country. The museum did an amazing project of collecting the microfilm of those newspapers, everything from, the Fresno Bee to the LA Times to everything in between. They were not just second or third section stories. They were front page, front section, first section stories. And so it just sort of goes to this point of fidelity to historical truth, and the ability now to do that online at the same time. All of the denials online, right? So the space is very tight and arguing, but it's really part of what my job and our job is to make sure that that truth is accessible,
Yes.
that our collection is robust, that we have the artifacts now that the survivor generation is getting older and disappearing over time, that their testimony, that their documentation, that their diaries, that their mementos are part of that historical truth and that record, and that we have to make sure it is there, and particularly so in this country, where it didn't happen, and it's easy to distance yourself, but it is our experience as well.
It is. The day that my mom and sister and father and I went to visit Auschwitz in 2017, we came back to have dinner that evening. And, it was kind of one of these, okay, who really wants to eat anyway? So let's just sit and talk for a little while. And asking my dad, this is not his family's history, it's my mom's family's history, but what do you remember from 1935 to 1940 as an American, as somebody who grew up in America, was born in Chicago, raised in Chicago? What does your family remember? And his response was, none of us knew what was going on. So it's kind of mind-boggling to think, and what's even more mind-boggling to me, of course, is that people in Europe, people in Germany, people in Poland were feigning innocence. That I have to use the word feigning. It's just it's just, you can't even comprehend that people wouldn't know.
Right. And denial is a really strong coping mechanism in human beings. But I think, again, onto the online space, the Americans in the Holocaust is viewable totally online. It's not the same experience as being there. But I think particularly for people like you and me who grew up hearing our parents say that, in your case, your dad, it's a very different story. And the messages, the isolationism, the really virile anti-Semitism and virulent, I should say, it is stunning, and was very much part of just the norm, but not the norm that you and I grew up with, being born in the States. So really powerful and accessible for everyone to see, and to see the paper from wherever you grew up. I'm sure the Chicago, is it Tribune or Sun? I can't remember. I'm sure that there are, as part of that exhibit, you can see the newspaper stories. They're right there.
Yeah.
The difference was the visuals were not there. I think that's the one most powerful piece is the visual evidence,
Right.
which is why in modern day genocide awareness and prevention, you know, seeking the evidence and sharing the visual evidence and imagery is really important because there's something in the human brain that can't deny what you see
That's right.
in
Mhm.
pictures, but you can deny what you read.
Mhm.
So it's really powerful.
You also can't deny what you feel.
Yeah.
You know, I mean, people can try, but
Yes, they can.
but the feeling is there. You know,
Yes. Yeah.
it's somewhere, whether it's in a muscle or a bone or an organ,
Yeah.
it's
It's
there.
there.
You were telling me this story about your daughter, and it's so nice to see your daughter here on Instagram Live. Thank you for
Oh,
joining.
is she? Oh, yay.
She's there. Yeah, yeah. But you know, you're telling me this story, and I'm literally getting goosebumps on my kneecaps, on my skull, like all over. It's amazing. You know, it isn't lost on me that we're actually having this conversation today, one day after the verdict came yesterday. And when, you know, without going too divergent, when we think about what happened with George Floyd and this concept of what you are talking about, the relentless fidelity of historical truth. It is a small, tiny step in that happening broadly across the U.S. And so let's hope that that is moving the needle just a little bit towards what always needs to be the relentless fidelity of telling the truth, the historical truth and the present truth.
Amen. What can I say? Amen. You know, and if we go back, you know, to the summer when everybody took to the streets or had signs on their front lawns, you know, I couldn't help but think, and I'm sure you and many of the people watching thought, what if people had done this around the world in 1939?
Right.
And I'm not suggesting or equating that that protestation had to do with how the jury made their decision. The case showed the truth, but I think this engagement on an individual choice and level to stand up and call out what
Yes.
is not right and what is not just, and othering others is really our charge. That really is the charge and the takeaway, and that's where individual power adds up together into a society that says we will fight for equity, we will fight for justice, we will not accept anything less, and we have a long way to go. But we're in this for the long run, and I think that's our purpose. That's our meaning. That's how we carry our history, our shared and other history forward.
Absolutely. One comment that has popped up here online is one response that this viewer had to the verdict was never again.
Yeah.
And yes, you know, I want to encourage everyone for our last few minutes here. If you have a question for Marla, go ahead and put it in the chat, and I will ask Marla for you. Because how, you know, it's rare that we get to have someone like you come on and, you know, really with the knowledge and expertise that you have to share your story and how it is that you're working with this material in your daily life. I mean, it's incredible. It's just incredible. So
It's an honor to be part of it, and in any small way, Beth, as you know, and to help your family story make forward and for people to experience it.
thank you.
Absolutely.
What do you think has been the most challenging aspect of the work that you do specifically for the museum and things that you would like to see happen? I'm sure you have a list of things that you want to implement and so forth. What are some of the challenges and what are some of the things that are next for you that you would like to implement?
So, you know, one of the beauties of the museum is that physically it sits on the National Mall. Literally, when you walk out of the museum, you see the Washington National Monument when you exit. That's the beautiful part. The hard part is we're very, very far away from that. So even the 10 states from Alaska, Hawaii, all the way to Montana are the furthest removed. My challenge always and my opportunity is to help bring the museum to people.
Sure.
Before the pandemic, we did it virtually in some ways, as I've already shared, and we've expanded those, but we did it a lot in person. And I think both are really important. And I think part of what I really hope to do is expand people's engagement with why this matters. And why it's not just for second and third generation of survivors to care about this. I really think that was a good part of why I was drawn to it, and in fact why the museum was sort of drawn to me, is that I think this is so important while it is not my history directly. And I think it's not just Jewish history, it's for everybody. And I get really excited when we do programs and people kind of, the light bulbs go off and the connections of that never again means much more than a Yom HaShoah, you know, a day of remembrance kind of service, but it's in everyday actions and thoughts and education and truth and all of that. So I'm looking forward, like all the rest of us, to safely being able to be in person.
Right.
I think a lot of this material is so deep, and while some of it can translate and you and I can still get goosebumps talking this way,
Right.
that I think something also happens when you're in person and you're in a room experiencing history and truth and forward thinking. And so I look very much forward to that. And I hope over time that the 10 states that we cover feel just as engaged as people who can walk into the museum by, you know, getting in an Uber or something else and going there physically in person.
Sure.
So that's really what I see my charge. I want this history to be, this history and this forward action to be much more widespread and much more part of our consciousness about our own democracy and why we should care so deeply about preserving our own democracy here in America and living up to its promise, which it has not yet done.
That's absolutely right. And we certainly have witnessed this year in particular how fragile our democracy is, how close we have come to things falling apart right in front of our very, very eyes. It's staggering. It's just staggering. I had the same response to Charlottesville that you did. It was so mind-blowing to me that it was one of the very first places that I traveled to when we began filming. We began principal photography in Jerusalem at Yad Vashem, but then when I came back to the States, first we came to the museum, we came to DC, but then our next stop was Charlottesville. And I said, I can't drive from DC to Chicago without stopping there and really understanding what happened and what was going on. And especially when you discover that the town is tiny. It's this tiny little postage stamp town.
Yeah.
So to think that there were mobs of people carrying tiki torches and open carry and all of it, it's mind-blowing.
Yeah. And that moment where you realize this wasn't a movie, this was actual real life, because we're very used to seeing it in movie version.
Yeah.
But this was in real time. And I also, I noticed that my sister-in-law is watching from Texas.
Great.
And her note just reminded me that the other piece of the museum that I wanted to make sure I said something about is the research capacity of the museum. The museum has a long association with the Internal Tracing Service, ITS. And for people who have some history or think they have some history with the Holocaust, the museum has done amazing work. I know we learned stuff we didn't know up until a year ago, 2 years ago. So please, if you have family history, you can just go to our website, ushmm.org, and into the research portal, and you can put in a request and learn more about your own history. And it's really powerful, and it sort of takes the experience, I hate to say, of a Charlottesville that happened in a small little town, but that set off so much reaction and awareness into a family setting, because those stories all happened in many small places to a few families that then had much larger effects. So, it's for me, it's a little bit about the personal becoming much larger and making waves out and exploring that dynamic.
Well, I really want to encourage everybody because we have a great group here, right here on Instagram Live. Thank you guys so much for showing up. We will also be reposting this on our YouTube channel at Beth Lane Film. And so for those that are watching, especially with the replay, because I'm guessing that most people that are on here right now are subscribers to the museum, follow your Instagram page, which is robust and wonderful and really lets everybody know about all the different events. There's so many incredible events that the museum sponsors and hosts. And I really want to encourage everybody to subscribe, follow. And there's just, I'm constantly learning new things every day. I wish I had enough time in my 24 hours to attend more of the events because they're so wonderful. And certainly the Week of Remembrance, and here, April is Genocide Awareness Month. I mean, there's just so much going on. But I learned so many incredible stories during Women's History Month, just from what the museum was offering and showing. And then we even grabbed content and we reposted it. We're like, yes, this is good. This is good.
Awesome. Thank you. Thank you. That's great. Thank you.
Absolutely, absolutely. Well, any final thoughts that you want to share? I'm so happy to know you, Marla, and I'm so grateful for the work you're doing. People, it's interesting. People are saying that to me, making the film, and I'm like, of course I'm doing this, But now I understand where they're coming from. Thank you for doing what you're doing, because each of us only has so much bandwidth,
Yes.
we can cover. And
thank you for saying that. I really I do feel it's a blessing to be able to be in the position to do the work, and I never thought this would be part of what I would be doing. It didn't seem like part of where I was going with my career, but it is very much a blending of personal and professional. And I'm happy to be helpful, as you know, and I'm just a real fan of yours. So this is definitely shared fandom, and I'm so excited for when the film actually happens, and maybe we'll get to see it in person at that point. I'm hoping it certainly will be. And as we say, Yasha Koch, may you go in strength, and may it be everything that your family memory and story should be, and it's intertwined with all of us. So thank you for having me. It was really fun to be with you.
It's wonderful having you, Marla. Thank you for making the time today to join us. And until next time, time. Thanks, everybody.
Take care.
Please sign in or subscribe to Beth Lane Film so you can see more talks. Next Wednesday, our guest is Christy Guevara Flanagan, who's an extraordinary filmmaker, documentary filmmaker, who has a film right now that's on the festival circuit. It's winning all kinds of awards, called Aguilas. And it is about the migrants who are crossing the border and the team of people that are searching for bones for migrants that did not make it. So really the refugee portal point of view into this conversation about awareness, consciousness, humanity, all of it. We are all one people. So I hope everybody joins us next week for Christy's talk. Thank you, Marla, for being here.
Thank you.
And everybody have a wonderful
Take care.
Thanks. Bye.